Welcome back to another episode of Agsolutley Fabulous. It's episode 27. Today we're going to be talking about lab-grown meat is now approved in Australia.
Yep, and we're also going to be talking about 62,000 kilograms of smuggled food stopped by Border Control and the zero fine that lady received.
Crazy. Gillian sent me another outrageous reel that we're going to discuss. And Elders-owned agency faces mass exodus of livestock agents in shock move. The question sent through with this AgFab's article recommendation is, what does this mean for the cattle market? More competitive equals higher prices? Question mark.
We'll wait and see what happens. But don't hold your breath because they are stock and station agents after all. But then the same category as Angus cattle.
Hi, welcome to Agsolutley Fabulous. My name is Gillian Fennell, also known as Station Mum 101. I love everything about agriculture, especially the people and especially communicating about what makes Australian ag so special.
And I'm Katja Williams, a beef, cattle and cropping farmer, and I love all things ag, and I'm also known as the ultimate farm wife. Together, we are Agsolutley Fabulous, and we are talking all things agriculture beyond the headlines.
And we can't wait to give our opinion to you, and we hope you enjoy it.
So let's get into today's episode.
We have a question about that later. So let's jump into some chit chat. Gillian, you've had a incredibly interesting week with big plan changes. Tell us a little bit about that.
I drove down to Coober, which is 3 hours away, to catch a plane to fly to Adelaide for a board meeting on Thursday. And when I arrived there, Rex had decided to not send the plane to Coober that day. So I was very unprepared. I had to jump in the car and just keep driving. But yeah, they said, you can fly down on Friday. And I'm like, that's really no use to me. And luckily I did have my own car. But that then also led to the fact that so mum and dad are going away. So I have had to retrieve their cat. It's actually my son's cat, but anyway, it lives at their farm. And in the 7.2 seconds it took me to put the carrier onto the passenger seat and then walk around to get in the driver's seat, he busted out of the cat carrier, pissed in the car. So that was a nice 9-hour drive with that delightful scent. It's embedded in my clothes. It's like, so I haven't been out to finish like steam cleaning it and stuff now, but I may have to buy a new car because everyone knows once the cat pees in your car, that's it. You have to sell it to get rid of the smell. So we'll see how successful we are. What about you, Kat? What have you been up to?
Big week. We're 1 week away from our on-property bull sale, so everything here is going flat bicky. Like we've got to do our normal farm jobs on top of all the preparation for that. For those who are listening earlier in the year, I had to get a new fridge because mine decided it wasn't going to work anymore. But between when we got the fridge and when the technician could come out and replace the piping that had split and broken, when it was still packed up, or even maybe before it was packed up and sent our way. So it's taken him nearly 5 months to get out to the farm to replace that. But now I have filtered water and an ice maker just in time for winter. So fantastic for that.
That's great.
Ultimate Farm Wife wise, we have 3 interviews currently live, with the 4th going out this Thursday. So once you hear this, it'll go live the day before. So we've got Natasha Yarrington, who calls out narcissism in family farming businesses and coping mechanisms. So how you can cohabitate on farm and how there is a silver lining at the end of the tunnel should you wish to stay. It is your call. It is up to you. But she has some really great coping methods and is a great tale for coming out the other side of that. Gillian, yours is live. You've hit over 200 downloads on yours. So that's very exciting. Jump across and have a good listen to Gillian's. Nick Anderson's came out last week, and so she talks about being the daughter outlaw. So how do you have a seat at the table in succession planning without actually being in the room? How you discuss actually having a voice, being on the same page with your husband, him being your advocate, but also how do you support him? Because he's in a rock between a hard place between his family and his family, basically, you and his family. So she talks about different ways to support him, even if they are down to the smallest things, like doing the traditional gender roles of keeping the house clean, keeping his meals going, because it's a really hard time for him as well as you. But if you look after him, he will look after you. Make sure he's your advocate in the room. So that's a really great one. And then Georgie's is coming out on Thursday. She has moved to the farm when we spoke to her in the first 12 months. So this is her second year on farm. She talks about the life changes, the lessons learnt. It's another great episode. Then we'll go into a little short break for the school holidays, and we'll be back after the break. So that's all great. The conference is coming together really, really well. We've got our first committee meeting coming up in the next couple of weeks, where we'll update everybody on how we are going for registering for a non-for-profit, because last year it was such a great year. We had 53 participants, we broke even, and we raised enough money in the charity auction to register as a non-for-profit. So for anyone who has gone through that process before, it is not straightforward. It takes time, it takes money. So there's an update on that. And then we're going to, jump into starting to confirm speakers for next year and jump into sponsorship mode. So hopefully I'm going to have the sponsorship packages all sorted for that meeting, and then we'll start distributing. So if you're listening and you want to jump on board either supporting this podcast, because Gillian and I don't get paid for this, but if you want to help us pay for the costs of running it, or you want to jump on board for the conference, check out those packages, send me an email or contact Gillian at the socials, and we'll get those sent through to you in the next couple of weeks.
Wow. So you just normal time for you then, Katja, just nice, steady, relaxing, all that sort of stuff.
Being a lady of leisure that I am as a farm wife.
Yeah, just the average day, just the average week.
Yeah.
One thing you won't be serving up at the bull sale for catering will be lab-grown meat, I'm assuming.
No, we are not doing lab-grown meat. We are doing proper beef. So with that, Gillian, great segue into our first topic. So Little Proud, can't think of his first name, announced through a Land article and through his socials the other day that lab-grown meat has been approved in Australia. So I guess that's where the protein research money has gone, Gillian.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And lab-grown meat is different to alternative proteins, because like most of the alternative proteins are based in grain, so they still have that primary production sort of component to them. Lab-grown meat takes cells from a calf and then grows it in a goo in a lab. So it is technically meat in the sense that it is animal protein cells, but the way that it becomes meat is probably slightly distasteful to the average consumer, which makes me wonder, like, why are companies even pursuing this? Like, we don't have a shortage of beef in the world. And I know everyone's like looking forward to the future and feeding the growing population, et cetera, which we can quite easily do if we cut down on our food waste, if we start utilising entire animals a lot better than we currently do, et cetera, et cetera. So lab-grown meat, it's interesting to see a lot of states in America are banning it.
Yep.
And the most fascinating thing for me is that so many people invest billions of dollars into this technology, and then it invariably just tanks because it's not commercially viable, because the consumer doesn't want it. And then, so we have these conversations all the time about what risk is it to the red meat industry, et cetera, et cetera. I think the risk realistically is very small. I think the only place we're likely to see it utilised is in food service. So you'll end up getting in your mass-produced like pies, sausage rolls, pizzas, those sorts of things. It'll say beef, but it may not be, and this is not the case at the moment. Everything that's labelled is the actual, like, came from a creature. It may end up being lab-grown meat, because it may be in the future that that's the most sort of cost-efficient, effective way to make those, there's food service, fast food items, those sorts of things. Which leads, my question is, will it be required to be labelled as contains lab-grown meat, not just contains meat? So that would be my question.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It needs to be very clear on the packaging, needs to be very, very clear on the process, because my concern is as well, anything that you take out of nature and you pop into a commercial process, you also get issues of cross-contamination, what kind of chemicals and additives are they using that's not natural? So anything that's synthetic that our body can't process, how is that going to affect, our bodies, our health? It's got all those sorts of things where research hasn't really deep dived into anything that has sustainable evidence for that. Sorry, substantial evidence for that. So that's where my concern is as well. If we're not putting something that our bodies can break down, then we're going to start having issues.
And it's that people will say, oh, it's better for the environment because it's not emitting methane. To produce this product on a commercial scale, right, this is a massive factory that takes a massive amount of electricity, of resources, all these sorts of things. So I think the environmental footprint, like when you think about what a cow or a sheep does, it eats the grass that grows from the rain, and then it through its processes internally converts that into meat, right? So that is a cow or a sheep is a self-contained protein generating item. Yes, it emits methane, but it's also sequesters methane in the pastures and those sorts of things. So it's part of the methane cycle. This other commercially produced manufactured item is not connected to that cycle at all. It just extracts and then doesn't sequester anything. It just uses. And yeah, so I think when they say, oh, its environmental credentials are great, I think that's a lie, to be completely honest. I think that's very creative accounting.
That sounds like they're buying their credits from somewhere and putting it on their business, because remember, you can do that. If a business which you look at and you go, how is that carbon neutral, or how is that great for the environment? That's what they're doing at the moment. They're buying credits, most likely from an agricultural company or farming based business, and putting it on their headline, on their head costs.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think it's going to go really well in Australia, to be honest. I don't think the consumer wants it. I don't think the consumer will pay for it. Yeah, but people will throw billions of dollars at it because it's new and it's novel and it's very exciting for them, and they think they're going to make a fortune. But yeah, I don't. Yeah, I personally find it a little bit distasteful. But anyway,
it hasn't worked in other countries, and it hasn't worked in America. I don't see how it's going to work here if it can't work there or in other countries.
No. All right. But on the topic of food, would you eat a bag of frozen frogs, Katja?
No, I would not eat a bag of frozen frogs.
That is some of the items that this particular person imported into Australia, was some frozen frogs. And personally, I wouldn't eat a frog, but if you want to eat frogs, if that's part of your cultural tradition, knock yourself out. But biosecurity, we cannot pretend that this was not a massive, massive risk to the biosecurity of Australia and the potential for bringing in diseases and pathogens that we don't have that could have destroyed our entire agricultural industry. And then to see this person just sort of slapped on the wrist and said, don't do it again. And we're not talking if you ever watch the border force shows or border control or whatever it's called, where Nana's coming from China and she's bringing the food that she likes to eat because she knows she won't be able to get it in Australia, and they unwrap it and it's usually an assortment of creatures. It's not just one little Nana or one little granddad bringing in some snacks. This was 62,000 kilograms of product that had attempted to be illegally brought into Australia. That is serious. That is a serious volume. And if that's what they found, what didn't they find? It would be my concern here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that she didn't get away with more than a slap on the wrist, what message does that send to other people who are importing stuff like that? I really hope there's something behind the scenes where she made a deal with them to be like, I'll get a slap on the wrist if I tell you intel about who else is importing it and how they're importing it and where they're importing it. So that's the only side that I can see. Well, maybe that's why she got a slap on the wrist.
I hope there was something else to it, because honestly, what message does that send? And this is a food stuff. These are foodstuffs, right? So anyone else who's importing illegal things into Australia, could be any sort of drugs, weapons, anything that doesn't belong here. They've just found out how pitiful our border control and biosecurity measures are. So yeah, I think it sends a really, really poor message to anyone who's seeking to bring those sorts of things into Australia, that, Australia's a bit of a joke when it comes to their biosecurity and border control, to be honest. But yeah, I do have another question about the frogs, though, that I'd really like answered. I would like to know, are they commercially farmed frogs? So in these countries, do they have frog farms? Or is there an entire frog catching, like harvesting wild caught frog industry? That is the burning question that I have about this, because in either scenario, can you imagine a frog farm? I can't, but maybe they do exist. I'm going to have to go and Google it now, I think, see if they have frog farms.
I'm pretty sure I've seen a frog farm. I'm going to see if I can find that article, that reel. I'm pretty sure they do in some places have grow them commercially. So that'll be really interesting. AdFabs, jump on the reels this week and tell us whether or not you think or know that they are as well. And I'll see if I can find that reel and send it through. This sort of goes in the same category as when they caught, I think it was at the earlier this year or end of last year, when they caught those people bringing in, what do they call it? Wild beef, wild game.
Oh yeah,
Bushmeat.
Yeah.
That's when they caught those people importing bushmeat, and the same thing. Like, they should have definitely have been fined. They definitely should have spent some time, and a proper investigation should have been launched into trying to eradicate that, because the same thing, biosecurity is a big thing. And I think Australia has been very, very lucky for such a long time that we are starting to get complacent, and in complacency, it will be a big issue coming up, whether it's lumpy skin disease or whether it's something else, because we seem to be very good at micro-focusing on a potential threat. But how about we lift our game and our resources on across the board? I mean, I'm still always surprised when on some of the borders of our states, particularly when we're going from New South Wales or Victoria into South Australia regions, I'm always still surprised how there's like just an honesty bin at a lot of the border crossings. Like, unless it's a major road going between the capitals, it's an honesty bin. And I'm just like, whoa. You're putting a lot back on people who have time and time again shown they're not honest.
People will continue to be people, and sometimes they can't be trusted, and it is a shame. And it is also a shame that we haven't managed to get these pests and stuff under control in Australia. Some of them may not be able to be gotten under control, and so this sort of semi-exclusion zone is the best that we can hope for. But we have to really, really crack down on things coming in from overseas, especially the likes of bushmeat, which is often unidentifiable types of protein that could have come from, again, if you want to eat these things in your home country and if it's legal, then knock yourselves out. But things like monkeys and that sort of thing that we don't have in Australia, that may carrying bacteria or pathogens that don't exist yet can enter into our different systems and really cause an impact. We can't just turn a blind eye to those sorts of things. We have to really start cracking down on it.
And a lot of these protein sources, whether it's protein or whether it's vegetative, a lot of it hasn't been prepped properly either. So a lot of it is being sent and spending weeks as an incubator in shipping containers, or however it's being brought across in people's luggage. It's not in proper food handling environments. It is actually just a beautiful petri dish for all this stuff really incubating to be in right form by the time it gets here to Australia. So we've got to absolutely eradicate it. But with that, let's head into question and answer.
Yeah, let's go.
Right, so we had one come through. Katja, last week you and Gillian mentioned that there was a premium and higher price selling value for cattle such as Angus and Hereford. So why aren't more people chasing this stock if there's a premium there in the market? So my first interpretation of this question is, if you are selling at 6,000 and you are buying at 6,000, your profit and loss, like in that transaction, is exactly the same as if you are selling for 12 and you are buying at 12. So yes, there's a premium, yes, there's higher volumes, But overall, as an estimated, just a standard, there's no extra premium value because your cash flow in that purchase is exactly the same.
Yeah. So, and this is the thing, there is in some markets, and this is where you get different types of cattle for different types of purposes, and sheep too, I guess, but I'm not a sheep expert. So I'm not a cattle expert either, to be completely honest. But so Angus and Hereford are very highly valued in the feedlotting and domestic supply chain because Angus especially did a magnificent job on the marketing side. You know, we have Angus burgers at McDonald's, all of this sort of thing. So now the consumer, the person who goes to Coles or Woolies or whatever, they look for Angus because they believe that it is a premium product. So it is just marketing, in my opinion. A good animal is a good animal regardless of its breed. Like, and now when you see things like Angus party pies and Angus sausage rolls and those sorts of things, that is highly unnecessary because it makes absolutely zero difference what is in those products whatsoever. But people believe it's a premium luxury product and are willing to pay more. So that's where that sort of comes from. Then you get the northern export trade, very little Angus and Hereford in those because they have different requirements. They need to be adjusted to tropical environments, those sorts of things, heavy Brahman content, those sort of stuff. Brahmans, like, because we have Charbres, which is a Brahman Charolais cross, they do really, really well in feedlot scenarios and those sorts of things. We like them for how they live here and the attributes that they have. But you couldn't send them, I guess, to a commercial sale, to an auction, and expect to receive probably the same price as the same type of animal, but of an Angus or a Hereford breed, because they're unusual in southern markets to a certain extent. People are very concerned about Brahman eating quality, those sorts of things, which in the past may have been true. Brahman breeders have done a lot of work on improving eating quality and those sorts of things. Yeah. And at the end of the day, people are people and they will breed what they like, which is why you see people pursuing things like Speckle Parks. Let's not talk about Wagyu. People breed Shorthorns, for crying out loud.
Thanks for that shout out, Gillian.
Yeah, people do have a preference for what sort of animals they like and what attributes that those particular breeds have, and if they're suited to their production system. And that's why you often see things like they will have a herd of maybe shorthorn cows, but they will put a Angus bull over them and then sell all of their progeny into the feedlots, into supermarkets, et cetera, because they have that Angus content, so they can get that little tiny bit higher price. But yeah, it's all, yeah, they maintain their core breeding herd of the breed that they like, but occasionally, every now and again, they'll cross something else over them to get that hybrid, to get that premium market if it exists. And sometimes it exists and sometimes it doesn't, and it's just and a lot of people have moved into looking for people. A lot of people have moved into breeding Angus, and in my opinion, in areas where they're not well suited. We see a lot of Angus in Central Australia. I don't think they really belong here.
That was my point.
They're black because it's not like a racist thing. It's a heat dispersal thing. Like, it does get really, really hot here. So, the darker coloured the cattle, the more they're going to challenge the struggle to disperse that heat and that sort of thing. Yes, they've got trees and all that sort of stuff, but, and they are a European breed. So genetically, yes, some of them have adapted to live in these sorts of things, and you can breed and you can select your best cows and all do all that sort of thing. But my opinion is that they don't really belong in the really hot, arid areas of Australia, and they really struggle in the tropics because they're just not suited for it. That's why more people aren't breeding those things, and that's why some people pursue breeding miniature Devon cattle and all these sorts of things, because they like them and they can.
A few years ago, Ned and I went up to the Sydney Royal Easter Show. Ned was honoured enough to be able to judge the lowlines, which were so cute. So they are miniature Angus. They have been selectively bred to only grow up to hip size. People will breed what they're going to breed, and different cattle suit different areas of Australia. Some are more naturally immune to things like tick. So if you're above the tick line in Australia, you usually breed a certain type of animal, a certain breed. If people are bringing other cattle from below that line, so more in New South Wales, Victoria, and they're bringing them up above that line, they will do some sort of acclimatization, but they will also have to do what is called blooding. So that is where they get the blood out of an animal that has been tick treated or is tick immune, and they will inject it into the animal so that it can create its own antibodies. So very similar to a vaccination, where they would do that to build up its tolerance before it goes over that tick line and into those markets. Fun fact. There's a lot into it.
There's a lot. There is a lot involved in selecting the right animal for the right environment. And yeah, it's been, because once upon a time, the only sort of cattle that were in the entire industry of Australia, you'd like this, Katja, was shorthorns. They ran them in the Gulf country. They ran them in the Kimberley. They were everywhere. And all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but gradually other breeds came here. And then when they discovered Brahmins, it was just, oh my God, revolutionised the northern cattle industry when Brahmins were introduced. All right. Oh, your life data and your day-to-day can help the ag sector in policy making. Did you know that?
We did know that. So that was a message that was sent through over on my personal socials. So we had an ag fab who was listening last week when we were talking about recording your data, because data will help policy making. So they didn't realize that their life data, their day-to-day, whatever they thought was normal for them, they didn't realize that it can actually help policy making, and they're going to start a diary so that when they get asked for data in the future, or when they need to give data in one of the surveys we were talking about, that they will be able to give factual data based on their own records. So that's really great to hear. Anyone else who's listening and wants to do the same thing, absolutely fantastic, because that data helps with policy making. It's real time, it's on the ground, and it is what we are doing.
Yep. And it's not just for ag, it's for childcare, education, health, how many kilometres you drive for the school run, how many kilometres you drive to the doctor, how often you have a doctor in your town, what services are at your kids' school, are they able to access certain subjects, all this sort of stuff. This is all vital information that if you see a survey come up, you really should, if you have the capacity, respond, because without that information, you know, they're able to ignore us, because for a long time we were really challenging to reach. We didn't give our opinion. Well, we weren't asked for a start. But then when we were starting to be asked, people wouldn't participate, because once burnt, sort of twice shy. Like it's those sorts of things. But we really need to start sharing our stories to ensure that at least we have the chance of having a voice. Yeah.
Absolutely. We also got a question coming through that said, remind us again why drought isn't classified as a natural disaster. I did do a Google answer. So what if I do the Google answer first, Gillian, and then you fill in if I've missed anything?
Yeah, let's do that.
So the Google answer. So drought is a slow onset phenomenon developed over months and even years. Unlike disasters such as flood, bushfires, cyclones, anything in that category, it makes it harder to define as a specific event with a clear beginning and a clear end. So Australians treat drought as a normal or reoccurring climatic condition, particularly in agriculture. Instead of responding through disaster relief, government encourages long-term adaptation and resilience, like improving water management, crop diversity, and financial risk planning, which you will see all of that in their funding, which has been released and put out through the DPI and is it the regional development?
Yeah, there's a lot of different bodies that have their fingers in those particular pies, because it's a very large bucket of money.
Yes. So I hope that answers your question.
And this is the thing, I think, that we all acknowledge that it's recurring in Australia, but also so are cyclones, so are bushfires, so are floods, those sorts of things. And I think what for agriculture specifically, 1 year, yep, most of us, if you're doing your job right, you can handle 1 year. 2 years, probably. 3, for a lot of people, that's really starting to stretch it a lot. So at what point does it become? And I don't think we want to, it's not a natural disaster as such, but it does require different types of support and relief to ensure that these whole regions, because it's not just individuals, it's entire regions and communities and towns that are impacted by this, the same as if it's a flood or a fire or a cyclone. Entire communities can be devastated with the effects of drought. So that's why the organisations that I'm involved in are now calling for. So we've got the National Drought Agreement, which was done in 2013, I think. It needs to be re-examined. It's been more than 10 years. You know, policy's moved on, environmental science has moved on, climate modelling has moved on. So now it is time to, is this fit for purpose? I say no. Are the measures that exist for support and development probably could be better utilised? There's a lot of money floating around. Is it hitting the mark? Is it helping farmers do what they need to do? So, yeah, I think it's not a natural disaster per se, but the longer it goes on, the more disastrous it is. So now's the time to re-examine that policy. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's dive into the next topic. So Gillian keeps sending me outrageous reels, and I think she's just trying to give me a heart attack in some of them. And the reel that she sent through this week, I think it's agricultural based because she's demonstrating on an eggplant. Is that right, Gillian?
Well, this follows along from last week where we had the glue that we still don't know what its precise purpose is. So I'm sure we've all heard of Botox, which comes from the botulinum thing. And if your animal has botulism, it's a really, really bad thing. Ladies use botulism. Well, lots of people use botulism. It's really helpful to inject into sweat glands if you suffer from excessive sweating and those sorts of things. Can be used to treat migraines. I once upon a time, if you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, I've got a really deep line in the centre of my thing. So I was involved in a committee where for about 12 months while we did this piece of work, I was just constantly like this. So I had a giant...
Gillian's pushing her face together. For those who aren't watching on the YouTube channel, Gillian's pushing her face together.
Real life, you can look really closely. I've got like a big wrinkle down between my eyebrows. And so I got Botox in the centre of my eyebrows to sort of lessen that a bit, because according to my youngest, I was really scary and had a scary face all the time. So I had that, and it did, and it's like it's lessened it. It's still there, obviously, because it wears off, but it was the most bizarre feeling. I don't anticipate there will ever be a time where I'll get it done again for commercial, like for beauty purposes, because it's just really weird. You think you're moving your face, but like nothing's happening. It was just odd. But anyway, did you know? You can't just, you don't just use it on your face. People use it, all over their whole bodies. And there is a thing, Katja, called scrotox.
Yes, that's what the real.
So can you imagine? This is not for the ladies. This is definitely not for the ladies. So this is if you are concerned about the way your scrotum might be hanging and being not very aesthetically pleasing. You can put Botox in there to make it look a bit fuller, hang a bit nicer. I don't know if it's a real thing. I don't know anyone who could ever possibly imagine having that done, because it's not cheap. But yeah, we'll put that.
Wonder whether that would be commercially available in agriculture, and whether people will start using that on their animals, particularly on the show circuit.
Funnily enough, they have a camel beauty competition over in Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or somewhere like that, and people have been disqualified for giving their camels beauty injections, so giving them fillers and Botox and that sort of thing. So can you imagine in the stud circles, like, Katja, would you be giving your bulls some scrotox?
No, I don't. No.
Next time you send them to the show.
If I wouldn't do it to me, I'm not going to do it to my animals, particularly just for beauty.
Yeah, we'll put that reel up again because it's pretty funny.
Yes, whoever doesn't know what the Botox is, Gillian did mention botulism. So it is a purified form of the botulinum toxin type A. That probably doesn't clear it up, but it is used to block nerve signals to the muscles, which temporarily reduce muscle activity.
Yeah, so when your animal gets botulism, it paralyzes them essentially, and you'll often find them, if they've had botulism, with their tongue out, they're near a water source because they can't drink, because everything gets paralyzed and they die a very terrible, horrible death. So the fact that someone considered taking that poison and refining it and then injecting it into people's muscles to stop them moving, blows my mind. But done well, it's pretty safe. Like I've had it done. Obviously, I'm assuming it's pretty safe if you don't do it to excess. But yeah, I don't know. Like for me, this is more of an indication that we as a society have far too much money and time on our hands, because if we are worried about the way people's scrotums hang and the aesthetic nature of a ball bag on a person, I think there's something wrong with us as a society. That could be better invested, that technology, that, like, I don't know who came up with that. Like, that energy could have been done, something far more positive could have come from that.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering internally, like, if that's changing the way that your muscles react. It's an external protein that has been taken from human blood plasma, and like human blood plasma is used as the stabilizer, and then it's also a salt solution to try and balance and hold the solution stable in your body. Like, what does that do to the rest of your body functions, and what would that do to an animal if you were then going to use it, on the show circuit or something like that?
Yeah, but I'm going to do some more research and find out if there is actually people who've ever had this procedure done. I won't be posting any results of photos.
Good.
Try to keep it PG, but yeah, it is interesting to be sure. But some people who might be getting some scrotox, no, I don't think they will actually be, but Elders-owned agency has faced a mass exodus of livestock agents. Yes. So what does this mean for the livestock selling industry, Katja? What do you reckon?
This was an AgFab article that was sent through. So thanks, guys, for continuing to send through your articles, your research, your information, and your questions. We love hearing from you. And this is actually where most of today's episode has come from. So thank you so much. Boys, you're turning up on my microphone. Can you stop, please?
Got to keep that bit in.
They're screeching like cockatiels or piglets. I don't know. Where was I? Yes, so keep sending those through. You can, again, reach myself either at the email address and Gillian at the socials. We will pick up on them wherever you send it through. Well, my first instinct was, okay, it makes the market initially more competitive, but that might just increase the work that they do for their clients in the initial resourcing, the initial trying to find clients. Most of those companies have an agreement where you can't take clients with you. That means you can't approach the clients. But if you've done your job really, really well, you've created connection with your clients. And if they find out the reason as to why the next mass exodus or why you've left the the company, they may feel as if they are more inclined to go with you anyway because of that rapport that you've built. So maybe a little bit more competitive, maybe they're going to do a little bit more work for you up front, particularly if they are binding together and combining their resources into their own company. I don't think it'll create higher market value because the producers who are coming to those markets, the feedlot industry, the normal sale market where your abattoirs and everything buy out of, they're not going to be paying higher prices just because there's another agency involved.
Yeah, so the way a lot of those sort of bigger buyers work is that they put out orders, and the orders are like, say, so we want 500 steers between 300 and 480 kilos, this many teeth, and we'll pay up to this dollars per kilo landed here, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think it's very likely that we will face
Sorry,
that we will see higher. So the way a lot of these bigger buyers work is that they put out orders, and the orders go out to all the agents. And so we're looking for a consistent line of, we need 1,000 steers aged 3 years old of 350 to 450 kilos, this many teeth, this type of breed composition delivered to here, and we'll go up to this many cents per kilo. So that's, and so there's a bit, when it comes down to it, there is still very little competition in the market because there's still only the same amount of people buying it. And those orders go to pretty much every single agent, so they have the better chance of filling those orders for the lower prices. Yeah, I think you're right, Katja. I think where farmers will see the difference will be the service given to them on the ground. So whether it's helping with drafting, helping with loading onto trucks, drafting at sale yards, all those sorts of things. maybe a little bit of help with marketing, so chasing up people who might have a bit of grass and looking for a few extra head of cattle, finding those, making those sorts of connections where you have the time and the ability to make those connections and those sorts of things, which you sometimes don't when you're working for a big agricultural company. So yeah, it'll be an interesting thing. It's very cyclical. We see a lot of this happen occasionally. Whenever one of the big companies like Elders or West Farmers, now it's Nutrient, go through these sort of restructuring type things, you'll see a lot of people leave. Some of them do go on and set up their own agencies. Some of them become sort of sole players, but it is really challenging. And it's really expensive to be a stock and station agent because the amount of insurances and all these sorts of things, and you have to be really financially viable because if a sale falls through, you're liable. So you have to be able to cover it, all that sort of stuff. So we don't see sole players in the industry. If they do exist for a long time, they usually have a very small select circle of clients, or they work in a particular area like stud and stock sales, those sorts of things. And it's really hard to be a solo or even a small agency for the stock and station agent game. So it'd be interesting to see what happens. But Queensland is a big market. There's a lot of cattle up there that are traded. So, might go okay. But when it comes to delivering higher prices for the farmer at the farm gate, I don't think we're going to see that, to be completely honest.
Yeah. And I think stud and station agencies are really interesting because we are starting to see succession planning, not necessarily with family succession planning like we do in family farming businesses, but in many established stock and station agents, when they are the smaller agencies, they will usually bring on someone who has worked for them for many, many years, and then they see this succession plan go through from them to the ownership of the business. They will slowly buy each other out. They'll become partners, and then the other one will buy the pre-established business out and take the clients over. So that's the succession planning that we usually see with them. So sometimes they will go through a rebranding or a rename when that partnership is complete, but it's essentially the same company with the same clients and the same books.
Yep. So yeah, just another day in big ag industry fuckery, to be completely honest.
And with that, guys, thank you so much for listening in to another episode of Agsolutley Fabulous. Find us over on the socials. A call out for our YouTube channel if you'd like to see Gillian's nice, beautiful face with those facial expressions she was pulling earlier. Then head over to the YouTube channel. You'll find us there, and keep sending us through everything. We'll talk to you all soon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye.